So, since Russia's full-scale invasion, we've been talking this for years now. European governments have perceived this differently, but we all spoke about historic turn point. But from a military standpoint, what has actually changed in most European security environment? Probably let's begin with Estonia because you're closer and you have like different experience than Slovenia. We're going to talk about this a lot.
I think mostly the biggest thing what has changed is rhetorics. And that's like 80% of all changes is in rhetorics, not in actions and not even in decisions. We have done a few things as all Europe, I mean, but definitely not as much we talk about the threat. Just one example, and really, in Estonia, we understand that between current situation and war, there is only one thing what we can measure, it's Ukrainian war. If this is over, it doesn't matter with what result, then the Russian threat is much higher immediately. So, and how we prepare for this? We do plans 5 years, 10 years. What if the peace, whatever kind of peace is coming next year, are we ready then? If we are going to buy something 2030 or 40 or so. So I would say in rhetorics, yes. In decisions, actions, not so much.
Is this frustrating? Okay, let me rephrase this. How frustrating that is?
Okay, the one result was November 23, where I put my paper of resign. Because things were not fast enough. And I felt that maybe with a new face, new chart, things are getting faster because, you know, my face may be not acceptable, not just my ideas. But today I see that the new chart has pretty much the same situation. Everything he wants is too fast. No, let's analyze. Let's think about first. This time of thinking is over, I think.
General Major, what has changed since 2022? Militarily speaking?
From my point of view, my colleague was a shot at that time. I was not. I was a force commander. I still remember when I spoke with previous shot and other colleagues in the army, and I visualize and feel the same. So we have the right pace. We have to change our behavior. I'm talking internally, inside of armed forces. Of course, the answer is positive. Were we, or let's say broader, how do I felt at that time around Europe fast enough? I don't think so. I think it's one of the hardest ways to shift the mindset, to do things different, faster, be more proactive. If I try to go on the scale of how do I personally felt at that time, and maybe even nowadays, how society is breathing concerning what happened in 21. I think that my country is today a little bit different than 4 years ago. That's just a feeling, because nevertheless, there is much more security issues, let's say articles, talking points on TV and so on and so on. If I compare for the last 4 years with I don't know, previous decade, security was, let's say, somewhere far behind. Yeah, also perception of what to do with armed forces. In our cases, in Slovenia, I can openly say it's a little bit different. Actually, it is different in several years than from 2010 to 2000, let's say 21. The biggest challenge which I actually have as a question is it's questions about time. So, you know, one of the theories talking about one of the biggest threats of societies, it's actually going on when this society is living actually for a long period of time in peace. So in case of Slovenia, if we are talking about independence war, we actually understand very well what happened then. We had, let's say, we gain independence, great, compared with other Balkan countries. I will not say it with a low price, but outstanding, on outstanding way we've been independent. So it means we're actually living in a peace for 77 years, let's say 80 years. One of the threats of society is if you're living for a long period of time in peace, societies, citizens, let's say, governance, political subjects, start believing that prosperity is going to go to eternity, but history is not proving that.
Yeah, I remember in early 2000s or 2010, after 9/11, we were all trying to figure out what's the role of NATO. And then you both have been in Afghanistan, Kosovo, you've been to Iraq. And now this shift with the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, really, it's not just a word that it's a changing environment. But for 2022, from Estonian perspective, was this a really strategic shock, or was just a confirmation of all the things that you were anticipating for a while?
It was both. It was confirmation and shock for society as well. For example, until 22, we lived we were less, I would say, aggressive towards all this Soviet history than, for example, Latvians. We had a lot of monuments reminding us the Soviet whatever heroes and soldiers, and we didn't touch them. We said, let them be, and that's okay. 22 March, that was something what I have not seen in Estonian character. We started to remove these. We took a very strong position against people who were drawing that letter to Ukrainian refugees or something. We sent people out from Estonia who are Russian citizens and behaved not according to our values. So, but I would say then it was kind of shock. But it also, for us, it as a child, of course, it was, we were talking about these things. That the war we may get is not something we have seen in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Kosovo, where we were wearing uniform, but we were dealing with criminals, terrorists, peasants. And we had always, they were outnumbered. We had better equipment, better everything. And it was war of, I would say, choices. And now everything not changed, but became clear.
Can you describe for us those early days as a child of full-scale invasion, end of February, March? How did Estonia react at that time?
Maybe we reacted even a bit before. In November 21, actually, if I go even further, June 21, we saw the migration, whatever you call, attack to Lithuania and Poland. And we saw some other activities. And we didn't understand what's going on, where the Russians are going now. So in December, it was quite clear they will do something in Ukraine. So in November, we decided to support Ukraine with howitzers, anti-tank missiles, and so on. So the first days was actually staying with a plan, because we saw, okay, it's not coming to us. We don't have to disperse our units or go to the ranges or something like this. Of course, we lifted or raised some level of readiness. We put more people onto the duty, to whatever raiders and something like this, situation awareness. But main focus was supporting Ukraine and finding equipment from our storages what could be used by Ukrainians. And I think that was, I would call this operation. Very long operation, lasting still, but that was a main focus.
Yeah, and it was pivotal for Ukraine as well. Slovenia?
Yeah, and maybe one more very important thing was Stratcom. So military uniform, BDU, was in Estonian state TV, in radio, if not every day, then every week, explaining what's going on and what threat we may have or we have. And that was also very, very important. The stratcom, the message, I would call it just explanation of the situation. And that was done by military, not by Chod, 2 times only. We had a lot of people, like 10, 15 people who were rotating in the media and giving the explanations all the time.
Yeah, great point. Slovenia is a little geographically distant to all the happening. What changed in Slovenia? What happened? You said you were not Chad at the time, but how is Slovenia different now after 4 years of full-scale invasion in Ukraine?
I would like to link what Martin said before, try to describe how was that happening in Estonia. So I still remember, I think it was the second day when Russians invade the Ukraine, and I was in front of TV and I was listening, let's say, statement on TV that probably, I think that word was used, probably Ukrainian will fail. And my wife was beside of me and she said, what? I said, that will not happen, because I deeply understand at that time that what's actually happened to Ukraine in that first day of war, I visualize and try to compare and link with our independence war. So I expect fully that Ukrainians will fight like we did it in 1991. So whole society approach, they will not surrender. That's actually what's happened. And now we see after 4 years of war that I was right at that time, because, I mean, how can you, I mean, it's not easy to conquer or defeat nations. I applaud absolutely about, of course, military decisions and particularly political decisions at that time, because we as a NATO allies, we support Ukraine from the day one. We also, let's say, empty our stockpiles and send as fast as possible different type of equipment. I will stop here, and we did the right thing at that moment.
Yes, you were right, and I saw some social media post a couple of days ago that 2022 Kiev will fall in 4 days. 2026 Volodymyr Zelensky is allowing May Day parade in Moscow. So a lot has changed since then, especially for the military planning. You're planning long-term, you're planning short-term, but do European countries, governments, and especially societies still treating this as a short-term crisis? Judging by your initial comments that there's a lot of talk and not a lot of action, would you agree with that?
I think yes. I think most of Europeans, including a lot of Estonians, they hope that one or other way it will end, and then there will be peace. Whatever reason, one of them is that Russians are exhausted. They do not have the resources anymore. And then we can go back to the usual business. I think that's what people think. But the numbers, I just say the airstrikes in Ukraine, I predict this month will be the highest number of airstrikes during all war. So the Russian capability is growing. And can you imagine if they stop the war? What they can do without battles, without wasting ammunition within 6 months. How many Shaheds, Garans, and cruise missiles they can produce within 6 months, and what they do then if we are not ready. And people do not like numbers. Emotionally, that's all okay. We look at the Ukrainian war and we say, Russians are losing 1,000 men per day and heavy losses by tanks and everything, and Ukrainians are very brave. So psychologically, I understand this, but numbers say it's getting more and more serious.
General Major, I know you love numbers. On the other hand, does this sort of view of society, of government in Estonia and especially Slovenia, we know treating it as a temporary crisis, it's going to pass over soon, Russia is depleted. Does this actually, that kind of attitude, does this weaken deterrence?
Yeah, it's It's a tricky question. I do believe that when people ask me where I live, for instance, normal citizens, how do I feel about it? I said, one is definitely sure. So the world has changed. I do not expect it's going to be the same in 10 or 15 years. For instance, if we compare the spirit, how it's going to be, let's say in 2008, 2009, before financial crisis, everything appears to be in Europe like, glory days. Everything should be normal. That Second World War massacre is going to be just, memories from the history, and then we will all prosper in the future. Just doing a business and grow and live a better life, us and our grandkids. So if you ask me how it's going to look from nowadays to from 10, 15, 20 years from now, I do not think it's going to be that way easy how we would like to see to be it. World has changed a lot in last 5 years. There's going to be still ongoing competition for limited resources, and several other things will appear in, let's say, our surrounding area in Europe. Now I'm not talking purely about, let's say, Russia. We got issue in the south, if we believe it or not. Yes, it's a huge country. They got the capacity to rebuild. Probably, let's say, how I feel right now. Probably we are in the European continent right now, probably on the phase when our American colleagues just before the Pearl Harbor, let's say, they support with the loans and materials Great Britain at that time, and then they shifted after January 7, 1941, drastically. We're not here yet, but we are changing. Our societies are changing in EU.
Yeah, we'll talk also about like broader cases and broader threat levels. General Herem, there's also a geographical component in this. NATO alliances is always strong on paper. We sign these declarations, we sign these agreements, we have plans. Emotionally, there's a difference between East and West. How dangerous is this for NATO unity, European unity, and also for deterrence, as we talked before?
Very dangerous. For example, years, even now, but years ago, in NATO, we were conducting exercises, and we were very proud of these exercises. Thousands of people and high tech. And then we said it's deterrence and it's preparation. But if you look at these details, what we did, that was like talented football players' summer camp. We brought together stars. They showed how fast they can run, 100 meters, less than 10 seconds. And we have very good equipment, and look at my salary list and all these kind of things. And we were enjoying this. We were the best in the world. And then we go back. But the plan how we're going to play football against the threat, the Russians, if we need to play, then where are all these players? Do we have any schemes or something like a standard situations? No. So, and we were just cheating ourselves that we are good. It's like we will not fight the war like Ukrainians do. We will do our way. We have F-35s and all this. Sorry, if you take off all your F-35s, how many missiles stays on the ground? So usually the picture is not good. It's much better than, I don't know, 3 years ago, but still. So it is cheating ourselves with enjoying what we see in the mirror.
Yeah, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. You wanted to add?
Let's say I a little bit disagree that we were cheating. I won't say that's cheating process, but we have to understand in what was the core tasks inside of alliance in the last 20 years. Crisis management. So all armies adopted to that. For instance, when all, let's say, many European countries joined to NATO, we were advised at that time, okay, you don't need all volunteer, you don't need conscript system, you don't need big armies anymore, you don't even need the tanks. I remember that was 22 years ago. And we shifted a little bit on that, to be deployed, to be FOBs, to be FOBIT. We call it FOBIT ourselves in Afghanistan because we live in FOBs. So asking me, let's say we all adopted it. If you compare to GBPs concerning to many European countries, starting looking in the 90s and then start compares, or if you go to check the CIPRI yearbook or something like that, let's say how many battalions and brigades we had by the end of 90s and then 25, 30 years later. So, investments in armed forces, let's say, shortly went down. We decrease in overall numbers as professional soldiers in the European continent in huge numbers. But, to doing and to address what my colleague said, a different side of the paper. Now we start talking about pure kinetic war fighting. You cannot, let's say, rebuild in a day or in a week. It's not something like to go, in a restaurant and order a dinner and you will feel great in your stomach in 30 minutes later. Armed forces is long-term process to build. To be a little bit different, to be more robust, to be updated by high tech, and so on and so on. I can see huge progress in last several years inside of NATO's alliance, and we cannot even nowadays, let's say, openly, by my personal opinion, openly compare countries in, let's say, in European side of alliance with Russia. So what's different in Russia today, like in, I don't know, Slovenia, Belgium, Estonia, or Germany, and so on and so on? What's the difference? They got pure war economy. Which countries got that in EU? None. We're still living, let's say, in a peacetime. Our economy is still working on peacetime. We are adopting, but vice versa.
But would you agree with the part of analogy that says that we had the star players, but at the moment we still don't have enough resources for that? Schemes and players.
I do believe it's not about, let's say, pure resources. First is the will. How fast you have to be. If you compare, for instance, you compare Russian GBP. The GBP, like I remember well, Italy. If you start to, let's say, playing with the numbers, 400, 500 million population new, comparing to the Russians, 120, 130. So if you compare with on the pillar of economy, it's not even comparable. But the fact is that what he says, I fully agree. One of the risks is if tomorrow is going to be peace, if they will still going on that, wartime machine economy, still producing, filling stockpiles, and so on and so on. If they will behave in the following years on that way, we have to be serious and careful.
But probably the numbers are not the one that are waging the war. There needs to be willingness as well. And there's a big discord between willingness in Russia and in European countries to wage war, sustainably have like high rate of casualties.
Yeah, I was in Zagreb a year ago. There was great academics, precisely what you just mentioned, about the will. If you ask me, is average European on the European citizen on the layer like how, let's say, Russians are actually preparing to die nowadays. Yesterday, 5 months ago, 35,000 Russian soldiers died per month. Also, their cultural agenda, what to do from their perspective, from the, let's say, motherland, Russia is on a different layer. I don't know. If you compare, for instance, I still remember how it was hard for all of us, not in our case, because we didn't suffer in Afghanistan, but many European countries during that period of time. It was not easy for any of country, for the publics, for the, how can they have, I'm now talking about inside of Russia, debate about it. There is misinformation. There is, people cannot read about that victims and so on and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're not that immune to disinformation here in Europe as well. Staying on the willingness, can deterrence work if politicians and some parts of society do not share the same view on a threat level as military do? And please don't just have in mind Estonia, because Estonia is probably more aligned with the perception of danger. Have in mind the whole Europe. I know that Chad cannot answer political questions for Slovenia, but in here we have already pro-Russian parties emerging. Can this work if we have such movements inside?
I do not believe that deterrence works at all. Because we were talking about the deterrence by denial and by punishment. So the punishment is, okay, if you come, you will pay the price, it's not acceptable for you. Do we understand what price Russians are ready to pay to achieve something? I would say we have no clue about it. The 1,000 people per day, that's what we talk, but actually they do not lose 1,000 killed in action. It's just losses. 1/3 of them are going back. And then by denial, what we deny, can we explain what Russians want to achieve with military aggression? Is it occupation of my capital? Is it destruction of NATO forces? Or is it mistrust, instability between us? And through this to get influence. Their solution. Ребята, давайте жить дружно in Russian. Let's live in friendship. And then if you go that way, we take their solution. Forget about your values and your way of living. So I don't think that deterrence works. We must prepare ourselves for decisive victory. And that's, if you cannot eliminate all the aggressor's capability, then you are not ready.
Yeah, okay, I understand, but you are professionals. You're judging this through your professional views. Can it be done, like defense, without the support of the society in terms of political views after 4 years of full-scale invasion?
It is possible, but I understand the perception in different countries is different, and it's all right. Different countries have a different threat. Slovenia will never receive 152 millimeter shells, at least not during the first phase of possible war. And I think never will. We will. So how we prepare our citizens? Do we explain them what they should expect? Or what we see, for example, in Estonia, there are experts and politicians are talking about the bomb shelters, like in Switzerland or Finland. And without this, they'll destroy all of us. It's not true. And if you're talking to people about this, they will not do any preparations. But if you explain, look at Ukraine, your basement is 99.9% good to save your life and prepare this, they may do this. You just must explain them and direct them. Or the schools or hospitals, again, in Estonia. Do they understand how they act or operate during the armed conflict? And you must go and explain them what the armed conflict is and what they should expect, the private companies. That's really, because if you look at Ukraine, a lot of private companies are functioning. They do something. Can we do this in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland as well, just to turn the target to whatever, war or defense objectives? Yes, it's possible. So that I would call the vaccination by information. It's preparing people. So it's avoiding all this misinformation, false conclusions, all this. That's what we have to do. We have to explain people, at least here in Estonia. And obviously elsewhere too, just explaining what are the threats.
General Major, how do we define threat in Slovenia? Is this instability in Western Balkans, hybrid, cyber, or even erosion of trust, resilience? What are the main threats now for our country?
Yeah, the fact is that probably we're feeling, I mean, if you ask me if my average Slovenian feels they something different, probably in some perception of life, let's say. I don't know, the oil gas ran up a month, 2 months ago, you know, people were in front of gas stations. I do believe that I got a feeling that we felt, I'm talking about society, something similar like you're going from our country up to the north. I fully understand that perception of threat is definitely defined by the locations where you are in the European map right now. But of course, we are inside of, let's say, alliance. Everybody has to do his job, which has to be done. Concerning the, let's say, deterrence, if you ask me, we got probably country in alliance which is on some different level. Now I'm talking about Finns, for instance. I read an article several years ago where I figured out that in Finland, after the Second World War, their president stated something like, try to quote close as much I could remember. He said on the radio that time, we were bleeding twice during the Second World War. So I promise to you, the Finns, that will not happen again ever in the future. So if you're looking them, of course they are nowadays closely to be prepared on the total war. But as society, they are in total, let's say, by my opinion, deterrence mode. So they can take care for every citizen. They got shelters for all. They got, you know, they never abolish conscript system, huge reserve, and so on and so on. If you're going more and more to the west, the stories are, let's say, different. But yeah, right now, if I compare, let's say, going closely, in our case, in Slovenia case, I'm in the army in armed forces almost 3 decades. I'm feeling right now the intentions. We have to do it faster, to be more proactive, and yeah.
But where we are in reality in Europe, what is the stage of, I don't want to use the word conflict. We don't have tanks in the NATO territory, foreign tanks. We don't have shells flying into our territory. But there are hostile actions on communication, on energy sector, on media, on elections. So where are we at the moment, looking through your professional eyes?
I'm not sure if Putin and Russians have planned how to invade to Estonia or somewhere, but they're definitely preparing the ground. Yesterday, cannot say the name of the Putin representative, he said that yes, Russia wants to talk with EU, but not with Kaja Kallas, because Kaja Kallas has said so nasty things about Russia. They are victims again. We were talking about this yesterday. They are victims again. That's how they behave. You all are threatening us. All we want from you, do not be aggressive against us, and we will live in peace and friendship, which is not true. That's actually what they want to do, is they're pretending to be not aggressive. And that message is received here in Estonia, in Slovenia, in UK, and some people are starting to think that really, maybe let's make some peace, relations and all this. And then you have General Herem in Estonia saying, stop it, buy more ammunition, waste money, not to culture, not to economy, but to ammunition, more ammunition. And that's how the conflict starts in our countries. But it's all, or not all and not in details, but it's organized very well by Russians quite often. There is freedom of word and freedom of opinion and pluralism and all this, I understand. But they are very good in this, pretending to be a friendly, finding good friends and or allies or partners among us, and then actually putting us into conflict against each other, weakening ourselves before the conflict.
Yeah, and we don't ask ourselves why Lavrov is on that position for so many years, for 30 years. He has a lot of experience on
He's
that.
good.
He's very good, yeah. Where are we?
Yep. I will not name a country, it's not polite, but anyway, I spoke with 2-3 generals, and we had a debate about previous time, and they said probably we didn't do our job well in the last 2 decades because we changed too much on the way, which is not supporting to be ready enough for let's say pure kinetic war, and we didn't dialogue on appropriate quality level with our politicians. Concerning where we are right now, I probably, on a layer below the conflict, or maybe in a certain of gray zone. So what's actually happening if you do not to be fully got full feeling of, let's say, it's peace in overall. So if you start lacking a portion of your stability in society, that's gonna have influence in your, let's say, path to achieve prosperity in a huge, in a certain way. So we can, for instance, we can compare that statement with the history, if you want. So my country was exposed during the Middle Ages in, 13th to 16th century. Ottoman Empire was coming from the south east to the northwest directions, and there's a great articles talking about why is the highest frequency of great musicians, composers north from the Alps, from the region of, let's say, Austria, Czechs, and Germany, and so on, because they were free for 300 years, who were fighting for 350 years, or leaving their shelters and homes. We did it, and Croats and so on. So that Balkan route was on the pressure. So that's that gray zone. So you actually don't need to, let's say, like we probably all understand, invade territory in a physical manner, shape a country or countries or region, and do that on a softer way. Got influence on public opinion, on will, maybe try to influence on the elections and so on and so on.
If I may to add, if you look what has happened during the 4 years Ukrainian war, so they are in war, they have sanctions and all this, and they are trying to be again victims. At the same time, they are violating our borders. They are making sabotage. They're poisoning people, assassinating. They create a faint news about politicians, making them with IA-based videos, whatever person. the Russians are behind this, what it is, if it's not preparing the ground. And then if you look inside of Russia, and I watch time to time the Russian news, they talk about the NATO and Western threat. They talk about fighting in Ukraine against 50 Western countries and being successful. That's a message to them. That's a preparation of own population. That's explanation of something they're going to do. Maybe not, but they have to prepare it. So I take it very, very seriously.
Okay, we are taking it seriously, at least through talks. You're talking about not being kinetic, you're talking about gray zone. General Major, when does all these attacks, cyber attacks, poisoning, disinformation, hybrid warfare, becomes your business? When is this military security issue?
I mean, in our, let's say, military doctrine, it's, let's say, composed by two major subjects or entities. On the left side is written down combat power. And we all know precisely what does it mean. On the other side, on the right side, is talking about will. You can actually win a war without shooting a bullet if you can influence on the human beings. That's very, very strong, let's say, weapon. If we try to escalate that statement on the inside of, let's say, alliance, so what the guy on the other side try to achieve precisely that, try to erode that, let's say, cohesion, general overall intent of all subjects. So what's the biggest difference between us and let's say, if we're talking about, of course, if we're talking about Russia? One of the biggest difference is the process, because the process is different. From their side, you got, let's say, one linear chain of command and one guy. In our cases, we got alliances. We got 30 elections. We got 30, let's say, presidents, prime minister, and so on and so on. So that's crucial to be supporting to each other. Try to hold together cohesion and going in the same direction. The same direction, it means, yes, to progress through the time, to be more robust in all matters. I'm talking about numbers and combat power and so on. And I think that we are today much, much stronger than, let's say, 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago. So they didn't succeed. Russia didn't succeed. After the war started in Ukraine, try to, let's say, separate it us, put it us on the other side of the table, or I didn't notice, let's say, I don't know which word is appropriate, disputes. We got the different opinions, but that ship is still going on the same way.
Okay, but again, where's the line in the sand when the military gets involved with all the cyber attacks? When is this still a matter of society, of resilience, of everything else? When do you step in?
I think that we have to understand that resilience as a concept, it's not subject A or subject B. I mean, armed forces are part of society, first of all. Second, if you want to be robust as armed forces, you have to, let's say, I'm talking inside the country, you have to breathe with society, with your citizens. There's probably definitely different layers if you're talking about responsibility. Who is responsible for what? Let's say in our cases, probably we who are living in Slovenia, I can state it openly, we got, let's say, a system with a long history, which is, by my question, it's outstanding. It cannot even compare with so many countries around the globe. Now I'm talking about civil protection. So whatever happened in the past in our country, now we can talking about ice or floods or fires or many other things. In the last 25 years, we responded close to perfectly.
Mhm.
All state subsystems supported
Are working.
So, similarly, something like that, we expect it if something worse happened. So all elements of society has to be ready. He was speaking before about, how the kids in the school and so on. Now we can talk about private organizations, responsible of government, responsible of private security sector, private sector, and so on and so on. Critical infrastructure and so on.
Yes, you're talking about winning war without firing a bullet. With influence, pen is mightier than a sword, but also civis pacem para bellum. What have you done in Estonia to get the resilience up after a full-scale invasion? What is your lesson learned, and what have you done as a child after the masks have fallen?
So first, in this hybrid threat, there are many components, starting from diplomacy, politics, ending with conventional military. And our task is to show that the military part is strong or it's real. Because whoever using the hybrid methods, the conventional power they have, Russians currently, they may just show it and make us not confident, or they may use it. So anyway, you must have adequate forces and to show to population that we can resist, we can defend our country. So if people see that the military forces are not capable, they will 2040, or they have lack of budget and that's why they will last just 3 days and then they are out of ammunition. Or in our case, when we have, Estonian wartime structure is 43,000. We're even going to grow it up to 55. Only 4,000 are professionals. The rest of them are citizens, the drivers and carpenters, trained in conscription. Every second, third year, they're coming to refreshment training. And they see what's happening in armed forces. Are we smart? Do we waste our time and resources, or we do some serious business there? Do we have proper equipment or good enough? And what we do there, they will take the message out. And actually the military is one state institutions which may make citizens to trust the state, like police, rescue board, all these institutions, they make this basically self-confidence of the population. And that's very, very important. So what we did, and that was many, many years before, actually we started 2012, we had also 44,000 troops, but they were empty. They were all empty. Even we had the people, but one battalion had the uniforms, another one had weapons, and third one had ammunition. So we changed all. We went back to 16,000, and then we started to grow. And then the moment was actually 22 January, where it was my responsibility. I went to the government and they said, "Dear government, I've said you previously too that we do not have ammunition. So we may have more than Latvians, and that's good. That's very good, but we still do not have enough. So we have to invest money immediately." And 21, when our budget was somewhere 700 million, the Estonian government decided to invest into defense 1.2 billion during next 3 years, whatever, how fast we can get the equipment. So what we did then, we started to practice even more with reservists. So 30% or a bit more reservists every year. You have to call them to refreshment training. So, and we started to evaluate them. So the combat readiness evaluation, according to NATO. We did this also a long time ago, but you have to be honest there in front of, I don't know, politicians and battalion commanders. If you do not have ammunition, if you do not have personnel and they are not trained, you fail. This battalion will not defend Estonia. And it's not known only for politicians. Again, there are soldiers, carpenters, teachers, taxi drivers, and they must understand how strong we are.
Does any of this sound familiar?
Yeah, probably we should not put on the same agenda understanding. Let's say when we are talking about resilience, we in the dress code, in the military uniform, the most appropriate word for us is, let's say, be ready to fight and combat power. That's the summary of different elements, which is my colleague just talking about right now. So yeah,
he's also talking about empty units and not having enough ammunition. So in which stage are we at the moment?
If I may correct, you may have empty units, but do not put them on a map where you are drawing the state defense plan. That's most important. For future, for planning, these empty units are okay. Just don't play with them on a battlefield, on a map.
We're facing kind of the same situation here, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, similar countries, just location on the map is a little bit different. But yeah, we are currently in the phase, let's say, we abolished conscript system 22 years ago. Since then, we're all volunteer. Right now, we are, let's say, I hope it's going to be all of us, let's say 8,000 by the end of the 8,000 by the end of the year. We stop decreasing for last, let's say, armed forces overall number in last 15 years. We stopped that. We stop. We're linear. We were a little bit younger today than last year. And of course, what do I wish is that we're going to go up. So it's not armed forces decision anywhere in the world how you will manage that. It's pure political decision. But the fact is, like he mentioned before, if you need more, and that more we clearly stated on our resolution of long-term development of armed forces, where the parliament adopted our overall numbers, talking about 40,000. So, did we train for the last 20 years with that amount of personnel who are still on the paper? No. Can we put the arms in their hands? Yes. Do we have to do that in the future? Not in the future, but tomorrow? Yes. We have to. We have to build that up. It's gonna be one of the crucial tasks in the future to be more robust. Why? Because the armed forces has to be capable to answer on different scenarios at the same time. Now I'm start talking about playing with Article 3 and Article 5 of NATO Treaty Agreement. So the state signed as alliance what we have to do, and we will have to use it, that units, who's gonna taking care of at the same time, the same situation, who's gonna taking the role in my country. Different scenarios can happen. So yeah, of course, you need military personnel for that. You need ammunition, you need weapons, you need vehicles, you need everything, BDUs, and so on. So I address that, and I will address that in the future. Of course.
May I bring something positive too? The way I'm too critical. So 22 January, before the full scale, Estonian government decided to give for armed forces 300 million just for ammunition. Later there were other decisions, altogether more than 1 billion, but in January it was 15 or something decision, and it was public. 300 million, and our budget was 700 or 600. Next day, Estonian teachers went to the street and they requested bigger salary. And actually what they needed was around 10 million euros. 310. Nobody among teachers, nobody among politicians, at least loud in media, never said, come on, take this 10 million from this 300 and that's it, it's done, it's so easy. Nobody said. So nobody was touching this defense issue. And this is something what reflects the confidence, trust, resilience. That's very, very important, I think. And here where we can, again, I don't know, vaccinate population against whatever IO propaganda and stuff.
Oh, the latest reports here are we're taking 100 millions from the defense. But I just want to be very concrete. I'm sorry, concrete with asking you what were the steps you took or you will chart to, apart from Trivelis that you did repeatedly, to get those carpenters, combat-ready civilians and professionals up to the readiness that Estonia has now?
Small things and big things and things that caused a scandal. 2016, I was a chief of staff, so not short, but also important colonel then. And I was the head of 10 years planning project. And we saw that we have no money for developing, we can just exist. We will not grow our ammunition or something. And to go to government and explain, that was hopeless because you are a compulsory institution for the state and just be 2 parades and all this. So we decided to change everything and to become, I called it ugly army. People said, well, this. I said, let's quit everything which is not fighting, which is nice. So year after year, we did it. We changed our orchestra. They were all military, 40 people. We were spending for them 1.5 million a year. So now only 5, and they have half time. And people didn't like, especially musicians. The sport platoon, their uniforms, many, many other things. So we just started to show for population that the military main task is to fight, not to be shiny and nice on parades. That was a scandal. That was in many people didn't understand us. And I think the understanding came only 22, somewhere January, February. And many politicians, many journalists, they were saying until then that, and then I wasn't hippie like right now. I was a bold guy, wearing only the BDU and talking only by shouting and all this. So, and then suddenly people realized that, okay, if we have military, then it must be capable. Doesn't matter how capable, but let's not keep just one institution because we have to have it. So I think that's how we won the hearts and minds of government and society. We started to do the real thing.
I can add our case, what Martin just said. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I was a battle group commander responsible to set up conditions and then bring, let's say, battle group to the combat readiness evaluation test. I still remember that time. There was time with, let's say, finance at that time was so small. When we finished the training process of 18 months, I personally checked the main training area in Pocek, who was actually on the training field at that time. It was all of us, not because all other soldiers do not want to train, but there was not money for that. Today, that's definitely differently. We are trying for the last 2 years, let's say, severely attack, as he mentioned, let's say, musicians and stuff like that. I will say we try to attack, and we are quite successful.
Reorganize them.
To attack those activities in armed forces who are not crucial for the combat power, to put them on a side. And also change some legislation frame. We achieved that when we changed the law of armed forces, by the beginning of January this year. So we put, by that small changes, we put on the center of the white paper training of armed forces. I missed that as a brigade commander, battalion commander, company commander, platoon commander 25 years ago. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. In our case, I mean, one of the biggest difference between Estonia and Slovenia is you got still the conscript system alive. We stopped that 22 years ago. If you want, if we will address that one of the principles of war, it's abbreviation MUSEMUS, but the first M is a mass. Does it mean mass? It's not only about the bullets in the stockpiles. It's also about human beings. In spite of all that, there is totally different layer of technologies, robotics and so on, unmanned system evolving in all armed forces. But by the end of the day, you will still need in the future also human beings. So probably that's one of the things we will have to address in a short period of time, in our case also.
General?
Yeah, the one maybe very military thing what we started to do, let's leave these orchestras and everything else. 2016, we were also talking about we have conscriptions, and all conscripts are actually not fighters. They are students. They become fighters in the very end of conscription, and then we organize them into battalions and companies. And in case of threat, we call them, we mobilize, and that must be very fast. So usually our refreshment trainings until then were 120 days advance announced. You know, they can settle their life, and the employers can do the changes and all this. 2016, we did first time the SNAPEX. It was on a company level. Now we do 1 or 2 battalions per year, so it's almost 1,500 people. And the SNAPEX is that government, and we had to change the regulations and laws. So the government one day received the situation, me too, or then I got, and then I go to government and say, okay, that's a threat. My proposal is to mobilize this and this unit. And they say, do it immediately. So we sent the message to reservists. We announced it in media. We had our own announcement system. And they came. Today, 70%, it doesn't matter, is it well prepared and before announced exercise or it's SNAPEX, 70% of people we call, they're coming. 20% we release because they have excuses, and 10% are usually punished, maybe up to 1,000 euros, because they don't care. But that's how we get not 70% of wartime strength, but 90% because there is a bit more people. And that works. And we started to do this by companies and then finally by battalions. Can you imagine employers? They don't like it at all because they have whatever, deliver something in the end of the week, and now you take off 2 workers from 5. That's catastrophe. Today, I think it's 70%, because we are paying salary for them, and they don't have to, the employers. Today, 70% of employers keep paying some kind of salary for reservists during these days, because our salary is very low. So, but that wasn't welcomed very well 2016. But you must move the edge all the time. And again, if we are not ready, then what we are talking about?
As we are entering the last circle, we're just gonna have like quick couple of questions. Be prepared for the question round as well. We started with NATO. We're gonna finish with NATO as well. They're changing perception, especially with our biggest ally in United States. They dispersed their focuses elsewhere. What does this mean for the future of Europe, actually?
Well, if we understand what actually happened after the Second World War, Now it's 80 years later. We probably all could agree that they put huge umbrella above European continent about security issues. Invest a lot of money to rebuild, let's say, in wider perspective. I think 7, 8, or 9 European countries after the Second World War were inside of that Monroe Plan with the budget. And yeah, but today, 8 years later, what we can all see and read from the open source, and they state it in their national security also, they tell us, let's say, quite easy things to understand. You have to stand on your own feet after 8 decades. Maybe that's the changing of perception between, butter and iron from all our societies. They just said to us, our focus is going to be somewhere else in the near future for their reasons, and that's their right that's the right from their sides to tell us in that way. In the following years, we will definitely see how that European pillar of NATO is going to be more and more, let's say, strong, robust, fast, even bigger. So some big countries clearly announce their final goals about overall numbers. Now we can start talking about Poland, for instance, or Germany clearly stated we want to be the strongest army in a European continent, and that they put up clear numbers how to achieve it. They said, okay, we will invest severe money, and that's it. So one period of time is clicking to be stopped.
And another one's coming in.
And another one is coming in. So what's actually the history of European continent for the last 1,000 years? Not the peace, war all the time. So the time frame which we're living right now is it's the longest period of peace. If you like it to hear it or not, the history of humankind is not a peace. It's a war and blood. That's fact. That's what they're saying to us.
General Herem, for Estonia and for the Baltic countries, alliances are incremental.
Absolutely, but that's a reality. But the strange thing is that, and it's not a secret, it's public. If there is a threat, then in Estonia, UK and France, in Latvia, Sweden, Norway, Canada, and other countries too, and in Lithuania, Germans mainly, they must reinforce our armed forces there, not Americans. First 2 weeks, they must fight next by us, not Americans. Of course, America will provide intel and maybe air defense. If you look at the Baltic Sea, there are no Americans. There are no Brits even. There are everybody from Germany to Finland and we as well. Again, no Americans. So before we start to cry that Americans are not coming, let's worry about this first 2 weeks. Let's fix this. We have to do this anyway. And to be honest, doesn't matter who is president right now in US. I think the Americans are coming. They maybe, the rhetorics at the beginning will be, don't worry, I'll fix it. And then a week later say, oh shit, I'll fix it different way. And then different way. And then after a few weeks, they're coming. But these first weeks were anyway our responsibility. So we must focus on this anyway.
Well, thank you very much for the question.
Yeah, I will try go back a little bit. I still remember that the same issues which you stand out. 20 years ago, 21 years ago, I was reconnaissance company commander under umbrella of European Union in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I still remember from that day that approach of thinking was alive at that time also. So try to find out the answer to the question, how is going to be security setting out in Europe tomorrow, let's say. Today, 20 years later, I can see we are here like we were there 2 decades ago. So from military perspective, I cannot say for all other countries, but I can say openly for let's say, our armed forces. We actually didn't have, we do not have, and I'm quite convinced we will never have 2 sets of forces. One for EU and one for NATO. I do understand that in the past, NATO was, let's say, security alliance, and European Union was set up from something else. I do believe that we will gonna go on the way that stronger EU portion as allies will also provide strongest, more cohesive, and more robust NATO as alliance.
General Herem?
Yes, so first, I do not expect EU to do a lot in military affairs except resources. And I don't think it's even possible or needed. NATO is passive US, I would say, more passive US. Is possible because there are still countries which have the common interests, maybe to say common values. When we talk about the Russian threat or whatever threat from south, for example, then we still have the common interests, and all our defense plans should be planned based on these countries. And it's possible to do it within NATO. We do it even today. Different countries are contributing to my defense on a different level. And that's okay for us. So why not to take the American part smaller? Is it possible? I think it is. Because it was earlier mentioned, the resources what we have. For example, the resources we put to the fighting with COVID were times bigger than we have spent so far to support Ukraine or for our own defense. So I think European countries must do what have to do. US may be just support, not the main power. And finally, we have no alternative as long we are disagree with Russian proposals and Russian whatever demands also.
Thank you very much. We're kind of running out of time. One quick question from the audience.
Yeah, hello. My name is Brim. I'm from the Euro-Atlantic Council of Slovenia. I have 2 short questions. So the first one is, since we're talking about hybrid threats and we need a whole society approach, I've always seen that this is kind of the process of narrowing that gray zone so that hybrid threats are less effective. And that's preparing your society. I was going to ask you, what is your opinion on, do we need to get used to having, to stop having a distinction between a peacetime economy and a wartime economy? From a military perspective, should we have a kind of hybrid economy that's running all the time? From what you said in Estonia, you kind of already have that system going on. And my second question is to General Herem. You said that you don't believe in deterrence anymore. But all the structure or changes that you've described, that's deterrence. Surely you are increasing your defense capabilities in preparation for war. But if we accept that and deterrence we need to do away with, all you're left is compellence. So maybe this is too much of a provocative question, but if that's all you're left with, how are you going to compel a nuclear power in terms of Russia? You talked about a decisive victory. Is that a NATO parade on Red Square? How are you going to achieve that decisive victory if we've done away with deterrence? Thank you.
Yes.
I will try with your first question. So you mentioned hybrid economy. So I said to one of my intelligence officers 3 years ago, provide me information how many car factories are around the European continent, and we will count them 10 years later. So I'm not economy expert, but I do not expect that shift is going to happen tomorrow in Europe. But I do believe that many countries, even nowadays already, trying to provide or mitigate bad scenarios. And what is bad scenario? Bad scenario is if situation collapse and you have to fight, for instance. Probably something similar could threaten the I don't know, for instance, logistics supply chains. Like we all saw what happened during the COVID, how we all behave in Europe, for instance, during the COVID. We all understand in Slovenia the masks. Who produced it at that time? If I remember well, none in the continent. They were produced only in China, for instance. That aspect many countries address even right now. It's happening. So in order to be more robust, if you will need it, to get that chain of logistics supply inside of your territory, have to be capable to manage the process when you will need it, from bullet to the BDU and everything in the between, to do it on the faster way. That's not hybrid approach, I will say, but it is smart approach.
General Herem, on the deterrence?
I think today the economy must act as they act, because let them make money, and weapons are made from money. If they start to produce something which is very smart, needed for military, it's not economy anymore, and that goes to wrong direction. The deterrence. First, if you think about a nuclear weapon, then we still, I don't know, maybe it's hope or it's calculation that Russians will not use it. If we bring nuclear weapon into game and say, what about nuclear? Then I suggest to give up immediately. Okay, Russians, what do you want us to do? Because you have nuclear weapon, what do you want us to do? That's it. So until the nuclear, everything else is possible. Decisive victory is not a parade on a red square. I don't want to see any Russians crowned. Never. I don't want to go there. Decisive victory in case of their aggression is that our borders are restored and our society feels this situation as victory and defended Estonia and ready for the next aggression. So if we have to, kill every single invader on our ground, including all assets supporting from Russian territory, doesn't matter how far, then we have to do this. And that's actually what Ukrainians are doing. Kill them all who are on their country and don't follow them over the border. That's it.
I would like to add on your questions, for your second question, just a small, short statement. We soldiers, we don't want to attack what is in front of us. We want to be, we want to defend what is behind our back. I know that you understand what I just said.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the questions. Maybe just the last question for you, General Major. You're fairly new at child position. Do you still like your job?
Yeah, I mean, where I'm living, I noticed two things. The first is quite often question people who living around me, what's the difference? So Martin knows the answer, which I will say. When you're shot, you're alone. You're on the peak and you're alone. And the other, let's say, my personal observations, people quite often ask, how do you feel and stuff like that. I said, hey, I didn't change. I'm the same guy, but a couple of surrounding personnel changed attitude to me. Otherwise, yeah. I'm honored to be in that position. And I, of course, like my predecessors in that position in last 35 years, we'll try to do as much as we can as an army to, to get positive influence in the following years and decades on the security of our country and the alliance. That's my job.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all those comments, all those answers, your insights. I ask you now to join outside for a brief refreshment, and let's keep our chat have company so he will not be alone. Thank you very much.